This is a meeting of the Environmental Control Board, and we're calling it to order at this time. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the July 30th meeting? And no corrections, I assume? So the minutes are adopted. Buildings Department's got a pretty full agenda today, and I'll ask Ronaldo Helton to brief us.
Good morning. Apartment buildings has three different proposals today, and I'll start with the request to amend the expenditure schedule with respect to mitigated penalties after default and correction, certification of correction. So the apartment buildings seeks to amend its ECB penalty schedule to allow a reduction in its default penalty amount if and when a respondent files an acceptable certificate of correction with the department. We believe, as you know, default penalties are calculated 5 times standard default, standard penalty. And so, and with the strict default reopening rules, we believe that this would kind of empower respondents a little bit more to, or encourage respondents a little bit more to correct, leading to increased public safety in exchange for half that penalty. And that is the first request. Any questions?
How long after we perform a correct and have the penalties? Is there a time period?
Respondents can correct a violation at any time after it's issued. So after default, you can correct. What's happening though, the penalty section the penalty is being administered by ECD, and correction is being administered by buildings. And so when a respondent defaults, they normally don't even, to certify correction, they don't have to go to ECD at all. They come to the Department of Buildings. What we're trying to do is to empower or give them an incentive to correct. And increase public safety, where also help the city to collect on this default debt.
That question was, for the record, that question was from Lieutenant Albano.
Thank you, sorry.
It's okay. Are there any other questions? Is there a motion to go forward with publication? It's unanimously approved with presumed one abstention.
Thank you. My second proposal to the board involves just some amendments to our penalty schedule, kind of a cleanup of the penalty schedule. What we found some duplicative charge, which we're asking to delete. The charge of use of support scaffold without a user certificate. We find that it's already captured in another charge, so we're going to ask that be deleted from our penalty schedule. The second is the addition of a class 2, which is a major violation of BC 3314.4.5.8, which really requires a worker on a supported scaffold or on a scaffold to show that they're qualified. Two things, by training and by carrying the card around. It's like a driver license. So you have to go through a driver's ed class. That's one requirement. Then the next thing is to have your driver's license on you at all times. Same thing for those people who you see climbing on scaffolds and working on scaffolds. And this addition of a class 2, it is a class 1 offense if you don't have the training, right, unqualified. But we are allowing a class 2 if you have had the training but you don't meet the other requirement, which is you're driving with a license kind of thing, or working and not having that card on you. And so that's the second proposal that we're asking to add that class 2 charge to that.
Any questions?
Third Thirdly, on that, another one, your action to amend an infraction which failed to provide pedestrian protection on sidewalks, to add the 2014 code section that was inadvertently left off. When I did, a couple months ago, we did a general amendment to the penalty schedule to add the 2014 code sections. On this particular infraction, we inadvertently left off the 2014 code reference. We are also asking to amend a class 1 infraction, B107, which talks about new buildings or open lots occupied without a valid certificate of occupancy. And as written currently, that particular section, 118.2, refers to buildings that were built in accordance with the 2008 code. That was an oversight. We missed out all other buildings. And so we're asking that the section be changed to 118.1, which would cover all buildings that are occupied without a valid CO. And we are also asking to amend an infraction code for failing to obey a vacate order. We believe that, we think that it could be interpreted that that section that we cited, 207.4, may be interpreted as not being a charging section, so we're amending to a 28201.1, which is fail to obey the commissioner's order, and just change the language a little bit to make it very clear to respondents that you're disobeying an order of the commissioner. Any questions? There's no changes to counties at all. Zakini.
Is there a motion? Approved.
The main reason why we're here today is, as you know, there's a recent outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in South Bronx, and the city has enacted a new local law in order to hold owners of buildings responsible for maintaining their cooling towers, their evaporator condensers, and so on, and fluid coolers. Whatever that means, ask a mechanical engineer. So effective August 18, 2015, the mayor signed in law, local law 77, which basically amended the building code, the administrative section of the building code, to require the registration of these towers anytime they're discontinued also, the inspection, testing, cleaning, disinfecting, and maintenance of all cooling towers. In order to effectively enforce that, the department proposes 3 infractions and associated penalties because of the severity, however, and because of discussions with City Hall, we're just asking that the board promulgate these rules with a finding of substantial need for early implementation. And Kelly will address that after. So the first infraction would be for failure to register a cooling tower prior to operation, and we're asking for a $2,000 penalty for that. There's no opportunity for cure, but an opportunity for mitigation, which means that they would, if they correct on time or prior to the hearing, they would be having a half a penalty. And second is if respondent failed to notify of discontinued use or removal of the cooling tower, which require them to do some cleaning before they discontinue it. So it is a major violation. However, the penalty there is much lesser. It's an $800 penalty with an opportunity to cure and mitigate that hearing. And finally, their building owners are required by section 317.5 to file an annual certification of the cooling tower inspection, testing, cleaning, disinfecting, and maintenance as per the health code. And if they don't do that, we're asking for a $2,000 penalty with no opportunity for cure or mitigation. Any questions?
Elizabeth Nauer, citizen member. I had a question about the penalties in comparison to what the maximums are under the local law. In terms of the default penalties, if the local law says the maximum civil penalty would be $2,000 for a first violation, but we have, but there's a.
The local law or the rule? The local law just states that our maximum penalties are $10,000.
I'm sorry, the code provision.
Okay, the code provision says that these are major violations of the code, and our major violations have a maximum penalty in chapter 2 of our code of $10,000.
But there's a provision in here, and it's difficult for me to tell you which
Okay.
section it is, but if with
Of the local law?
the printout that we received on page 5, and if you look at, there's a section 2 little I in the middle of that page. It says, any owner of a building who violates any provision of this section or any of the rules promulgated thereunder shall be liable for a civil penalty of not more than $2,000 for a first violation, not more than $5,000 for a second or subsequent
I
violation.
think this local law, what you're reading is, this local law amends both the building code and the health code. And that part you're reading is amending the health code. Right?
It seems to be the provisions relating to inspections and testing.
No, it's under,
It's
it's
in
under
both.
Title 17.
It's
Okay,
in both.
okay.
Right, and health is.
I see,
Yeah,
okay.
health is, they're doing their own,
Okay, so
working
that's,
on their own.
all right. So this, the building code provisions just are the general maximum
Right.
for prosecute, okay.
Have we received a notice from City Hall for the expedited process?
What did we ask for?
Did we receive one? I think you mentioned.
Oh, we're asking that it be expedited because of our discussions with City.
Does the City Hall have to sign off on it?
Okay, we'll bring that back.
I think it requires a sign off by the mayor.
Sure.
I don't think we have a problem with it, but crossing our T's and dotting our I's.
Understand.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Did we vote to publish? No. Sure. It's a follow-up, but are we publishing? Yes. Is there a motion to publish? Okay. Motion is approved.
Good morning, Helene Balsam, Deputy General Counsel for Oath. In relation to the last proposal from the Hilton of the Building Department, we did our best to push through once the mayor signed the law. We actually drafted a proposed rule and sent it out to the law department and the mayor's office of operations, and not surprisingly got their approval very quickly. And although you haven't actually approved it yet, we published it since it's a proposed rule. So it was published in the proposal was published in the city record on August 21st, and the public hearing is scheduled for September 21st. Since it's a proposed rule, you can still comment like anybody else, and we can change it in any way that you feel is warranted, but we felt in terms of pushing things through and getting this done as soon as possible, that we should go ahead and do that, so.
Subject to your ratification.
Right. So we have the proposed rule. I don't know whether or not the copy that you have actually had the date and time of the hearing on it. The copy that was downloaded for me does not, but the date is September 21st, and that was what was published in the city record. So we have the 3 different charges that Ronaldo just talked about. And just to address your question, Elizabeth, under the health code, the maximum penalty is $2,000 for a first offense.
Can I ask one more question? About the actual implementation. So for the inspection and testing, I guess there are levels of contamination that the health department is going to set. So how does that, I mean, if the penalty schedule is finalized earlier than that happens, how does, there just won't be enforcement of the inspection and testing requirement until those levels are promulgated by the health department, is that correct?
There's a commission order in place, so commission order basically advises people that they have to have their cooling towers inspected.
Just inspected, visually inspected?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and
But that's
then,
in place,
and
that's
then
in place now.
once the thresholds are established, then the testing requirement will
Right,
kick
and we're
in.
working on actual rules that we're gonna promulgate that will override the commissioner's order and have a permanent rule in place covering that.
That was Jorge Martinez, but just, that was Jorge Martinez from the health. Yeah, and if you look at these sections really pertain to the registration or the deregistration, if you want to say it. And then the certifications actually aren't due until November. So there's
Okay,
a-
by that time,
Yeah.
okay.
Any other questions?
Excuse me. I'll ask the board to ratify publication of the proposed rules for the hearing. And I so move. Any questions or all in favor? I think it's unanimous. In connection with that, because there's a provision in the charter that we can't vote on the proposed rules until 3 days after the hearing. Next month's hearing is, I believe, scheduled for the 24th. If we move next month's hearing to the 25th, we will be able to vote on the proposed rules. Yes, the final rule, is what I meant. Because the hearing is scheduled for the 21st, we need a 3-day gap and to send out the reports and transcripts to the board members. So I would like to move that next month's meeting back 1 day for that purpose in order to expedite this whole process. Doing so will basically knock off 2 or 3 months out of the process normally it takes to do a rulemaking, and everything will be set to go in November when the rest of the mechanics involving these cooling towers will be in place.
So the meeting would be moved from Thursday to Friday?
Yeah. I hope that doesn't ruin anybody's Fridays. And we'll be sending out a notice to that effect, unless anybody's got a particular problem with that. Oh, you're planning a vacation? Oh, sorry about that. You can send the commissioner, I mean, you can come over. Anything else on that? Okay. I will refrain from saying that's cool. DEP has some requests.
Yep. Okay, good morning. Russell P. Kimmies, Assistant Counsel with the Department of Environmental Protection. This month, DEP is requesting that the board approve a cease and desist order under the Noise Control Code. The respondent is TD Bank, and the location is 1470 2nd Avenue in Manhattan. The air conditioner at this location has been cited for being too loud on 4 occasions. Most recently, just a couple of weeks ago on August 14th. Due to the repeated violations and continuing failure of the respondent to bring the equipment into compliance, the department is requesting that the board issue an order to cease and desist.
Any question? Motion? Approved with 1 abstention.
Thank you. The second matter is from the Bureau of Wastewater Treatment. The respondent here is PGB 38 LLC. This is a restaurant located at 1572 2nd Avenue. The restaurant has been repeatedly issued with commissioner's orders and notices of violation for failing to install the proper grease interceptor equipment. Based on the establishment's continuing failure to comply with those orders and with the notices of violation, DEP is requesting that the board issue an order to cease and desist.
Motion? Approved.
And finally, DEP has 28 requests for cease and desist orders to building owners who have failed to comply with commissioner's orders to install backflow prevention devices. In each of these cases, an NOV has been issued for failing to comply with the order, and in each of these cases, the respondent has been adjudicated in violation and is still not in compliance with the requirement. So based on that, in each of these 28 cases, DEP is asking the board to issue an order to cease and desist.
Motion? Unanimously approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With one abstention. Kelly Corso?
Good morning, Kelly Corso, Assistant Director for Adjudications for DCB. We have 11 recent reports for today's board. 7 of them pertain to backflow violations, 3 pertain to air code violations, and 1 pertains to a sewer code violation. In all of the cases, the hearing officers recommend that the CNDs either be discontinued or that no further action be required because of the establishment of compliance by the respondents of insurance. Short and sweet today.
Is there a motion? Unanimously approved. Thank you. Is there a motion to retire to executive session? Approved. We will now retire to executive session. Back on. Is there a motion to affirm the appeals decision? It's unanimous. And see you on the 25th. See through? Where did we set?
That's not in it.
Oh,
So the Commissioner had talked before about amending some PCD procedural rules to bring the Environmental Control Board into the hearings division. So that project is proceeding, and we should have a presentation for you next month. So there's been a lot of cutting and pasting, so I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Yeah, this is a little in-house housekeeping. In the next couple of months, there will be an announcement, very public announcement about major reorganization of the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings in the City of New York and the mechanics involved, essentially having to do with hearings that are a result of summonses being issued, as opposed to trials division stuff. There will be a lot of consolidation. Essentially, what it distills down to is this. Over the last 30, 40 years, there have been a lot of piecemeal changes in the various tribunals in the city. And there's a lot of legacy flotsam attached with that stuff. Some of it is arcane. Some of it is stuff that just doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, it's kind of like having to serve notice by carrier pigeon kind of thing. We don't have carrier pigeons anymore. Peter made sure of that. So it's a major effort. It's going to be essentially a 2-year effort to bring the process into the early 20th century. And maybe the next step will be to bring it into the 21st century. It sounds kind of silly, but just as an example, we're dealing with some computer systems from the 1980s, before there was the World Wide Web. The telephone in my office is a zillion times more sophisticated than some of the stuff that is done on paper right now. So it's a lot of streamlining, a lot of bringing things into line with the essential philosophy of the adjudicatory process has to be impartial, unbiased, neutral. And in my 7 or 8 months here so far, I have seen, particularly on that level, that there is a dramatic dissonance between the perception of the people who work at the tribunals and the public, the perception of the tribunals. And this is an effort to bring those two things into sync. That is, that it is neutral, that it is fair and impartial. I have no doubt that it is, but that is clearly not the public perception. And as most attorneys will tell you, that the perception of something being broken or improper or inappropriate is just as mortal a sin as actually it being broken, and we intend to deal with that. So that's what that's all about, basically.
Jorge Martinez, how these new changes, are they, or do you think they will affect how we function here, the board functions, or how the appeals process functions? Give us a heads up.
Not right away, perhaps down the road. I'm talking about years down the road. There's mechanical procedures that tie, for example, the health department and the buildings department, particularly into a very arcane dance to get something done. And that's something that will be addressed further down the line, but that requires legislation for a lot of it, because a lot of it is embedded in the charter or the ad code. It's in fact, in some cases, as we found out recently, with changing the venue of cases going to Consumer Affairs 12, which will happen sometime in September. We, much to everybody's surprise, we had to deal with some state laws regarding tobacco sales, and how to deal with that, because whomever wrote the state law back in whenever the heck they wrote it didn't conceive of the hearing process being what it is. Part of the legacy stuff we're dealing with is when a lot of this stuff was conceived, the volume of hearings was nothing approaching to what it is now. When this board was conceived in 1967, it was created in 71, but it was conceived in 1967. We're talking about, we would be sitting around here having the respondents come in front of us and having the hearings on summonses issued, which was nuts, because we do 700,000 summonses a year. And that's why we have hearing officers and all that today. So it's taking care of a lot of that arcane stuff. I mean, the only thing we don't have right now that we have to take care of is that the hearing officers have to wear powdered wigs. But I mean, I kind of like the idea. The older I get, but that's a different problem.
Commissioner, do you foresee any changes to the charter?
There might be changes to the charter, but that's at a pay grade above any of us here.
Would any of that or changes? Would any of those changes be required before we? Some of those changes that you talked about?
No. I mean, we are gauging our changes according to what we can do now and what would have to be done later. A lot of the changes that are coming down the line are tied to IT capability, computer programming capability. Oath has 4 computer systems that don't talk to each other very well. The end of the exercise, we're going to have one. It interfaces with 12 different computer systems from other agencies. Some of them are very modern, very new, and some of them are ancient. Part of the process will involve streamlining all of that, and I think we're going to be spending close to $3 million just on upgrading the computer systems and bringing them into line to one system, just in Oath itself. Hopefully, we'll complete this before all this stuff becomes obsolete and somebody has to do it all over again. Right, any other questions? I mean, I'll have more for you, hopefully we'll have more information for you at the next meeting on this stuff. Is there a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned.